If we had had a dog on this recovery, we could have truncated the resolution. We could have been out there in and out in less time. And it was a resource that we were missing on this side of the San Juans. Telluride's got a great dog program, but La Plata, Silverton, we just didn't have that resource available to us. Like we got this particular incident was deep burials. So we're talking like, of the three recovered customers, the shallowest one was over 20 feet deep. These were extractions with power tools. These guys were part of the landscape at that point after this violent event. If we were able to perforate the snow and get a dog's nose in there, they are remarkable tools. And just through reading my dog's body language, she tells me, like, when we're training or when it's validation for her test to be a Abby dog, like when the scene is clear and she cannot identify the presence of human scent.
Welcome back to another episode of the Tactical Alpinism Podcast, where we talk with leaders in mountain warfare, professional mountain guides, and athletes, all with the intent to highlight the crossover between recreational and military best practices in the mountains so that you can go bigger the next time you get out. My name is Maury, and before I get into announcing today's guest and introducing him, I'm going to talk two announcements. So first is that the day that this releases, there is 1 week left in the November Uphill Challenge. The target is getting 12,000 vertical feet of elevation gain in the month in order to enter to win the approximately $1,000 worth of prizes. So one ticket to enter, or one slot to win some of those prizes is 12,000 feet of uphill gain. If you get 6,000 feet more, so 18,000 feet or 24,000 feet, that adds more entries for you to win prizes or the prizes that are available. Second announcement is that this episode and the past few are now video based and also getting uploaded to YouTube. And so if you're watching this, you might see that I actually have a baby in my arms right now because my kid is sick and can't stand being put down. And so I'm just doubling up on duties of both recording this intro and taking care of the kiddo. Today's guest is Michael Ackerman, who's been on the podcast before to talk about his company, SaskTech, and some of the tactical training they do. Michael is an educator, adventurer, and longtime mountain professional from Colorado's Western Slope. With more than 25 years in the field, he's trained elite military teams and then mountain leaders from across the industry to perform at really high levels in environments of consequence. He built his foundation between Prescott College, Fort Lewis College, and Harvard University, and then went on to work as a mountain guide, ski patroller, avalanche forecaster, backcountry educator, SAR technician, and canine handler. Alongside his rescue dog, Lucille, or Lulu, who's one of the main characters in today's episode, he serves on multiple winter response teams and contributes to the field through research, presentations, and expertise on avalanche rescue. Michael is now the executive director of the Silverton Avalanche School, or the Abbey School, where he oversees all operations, training, and the long-term vision. He's passionate about wild, snowy places and about helping others move through them with confidence, humility, and skill. The podcast is continuing to grow, and that is largely thanks to you all sharing it. Word of mouth is absolutely the way that this thing continues to get in front of people who find it valuable. So I'm going to continue to ask for you to share it with at least one person that you think will find it interesting. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the backside of this episode. Where I wanted to start, Mike was talking the history of professional versus recreational avalanche education. If you can just distinguish between the two for folks that might not understand or have heard of what the difference between the two is?
Prior to 2017, whether you were a recreationalist, so somebody that pursued backcountry skiing, climbing, somebody that encountered avalanche terrain as just a hobby or as a weekend warrior, you were in the same training effort, the same line of training as professionals in the United States. So your ski patrollers, your mountain guides, your highway forecasters. And the old system had a level 1, a level 2, level 3. In 2014, the conversation began centered on how these different demographics need their own unique line of effort. And recreational students definitely need a different avalanche education than someone that's going to be operational in a professional capacity. By 2017, the groundwork had been laid, and we came to what's shorthand in the industry called the split. So 2017, we rolled out a distinct lane for recreational education, and we had a distinct path for professional education. And they rely on each other. There's prerequisites to get into the pro track based upon what you do in the rec track. And I would say, it's really enhanced the learning for all demographics. You can better teach to the students that you have in front of them, in front of you as an instructor, because you really coming from a place of what they need rather trying to do this wholesale approach to education and having it be mediocre for everyone.
You go into a little bit more detail on what the difference is between what a recreational audience needs and what a pro audience needs, especially at what used to be the recreational level 2 and where that split occurred.
Sure. So in the olden days, back when it was level 1, level 2, level 3, level 1 was very similar to what it is these days. I'll use kind of a SAS-centric curriculum example here where we lean into the avalanche triangle. So we think about weather, we think about terrain, we think about snowpack and how those 3 outside sides of the avalanche triangle give us very objective information upon which to make decisions. And then in the middle of that graphic organizer, in the middle of that avalanche triangle is we, the recreationalists. Sorry about that. Should we do this again? Should we do it again?
No, all
Okay.
good.
Okay. Let me silence my phone here.
Yeah, be a professional.
Totally. I didn't know she was going to call. I'm wondering if I have a meeting with her. Let me just 1 second. Yeah, there's nothing booked. That's a cold call. All right, I'm back with you, Maury. So yeah, in the middle of that avalanche triangle is we the human, right? And we can take very objective information and do very subjective things because we are want to act on emotion and ego, and that cognitive process can sometimes get overloaded for us, the hairy upright ape. So that's really what Rec 1 is like using that organizer of weather, snowpack, terrain, and then what am I doing to influence very objective information to make some sort of subjective decision. And how should I use the awareness of that to better travel, navigate, and stay safe off-piste out in the backcountry in avalanche terrain. Former model level 2 was where we took a deep dive into snow science. So it's where you learn the crafts of snow pits, where you learned stability testing, where you would learn to use the tools of the trade and basically become a burgeoning snow scientist at a very introductory Fisher-Price My First level. But that was the course with the math and the science, a deep dive into crystal metamorphism. Level 2 definitely was the most academic of the levels. And then level 3 was heavy terrain usage. So oftentimes folks didn't take beyond their level 2. There weren't many level 3s offered each year. I can think of only one ever being offered back east. It was just it was the realm of mountain guides, forecasters, folks that were going to be out in terrain of consequence, being operational, and it wasn't offered a lot, and it basically represented the pinnacle of what you could do for training in the United States. Therefore, a lot of folks at that time would either pursue graduate studies, travel abroad to Canada. A lot of people went north to study from the Canadians. It was just a more robust ending or continuation of their learning journey. So tried to solve that with the split in 2017. Tried to um, basically correlate to international best practice. So at the level one or the Rec 1 level now, it's still the triangle. It's still that basic bedrock of everything we do in the Avalanche education world. But the Rec 2 nowadays, a little adrift. Different curriculum providers treat it differently. Um, some curriculums present the Rec 2 as more of a just like a more robust Rec 1 and kind of double down on the Rec 1 learning concepts. Other providers, again, I'll pick on Silverton here. We try to take it into more of a introductory to the pro world. So taking a deeper dive on all things rescue, on all things snow science, terrain travel, weather. We try to address through our Rec 2, and I wish more people took the Rec 2. I think it's a fantastic course.
I agree.
There's been this weird demographic that we call pro curious, and I actually just had my colleague Sean Zimmerman Wall at Area. I think he put it best, where it's like, let's change pro curious to, what the fuck did he call it? You're gonna have to edit this out. He called it pro. It just took the negative stigma away. What did he call it? I'll get it. It'll come to me. But basically, it's like, if you are able to on-ramp into the professional program after currently right now a Rec 1 and a rescue, shouldn't we give people a taste of what that pro world is?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose maybe this is agreeing, maybe this is a counter and disagreement. I don't quite know. But the advice I got before I went into the pro world was to go shadow multiple rec courses. Didn't matter if it was Rec 1 or Rec 2. And I felt like after I finished the Pro 1 and the Pro 2, that was exactly the right call, because I got to see multiple different instructors in multiple different conditions teach the thing.
And everybody's going to do it differently.
Yeah, and you get a ton of different experiences. And like, I've seen super professional, super experienced guides. Like, you might recognize the name Dave Nettle, who's just a legend in the Sierra. And he's sat in the back of Rec 1 classes that other instructors teach, just to sit in the back and be a part of it.
Yeah, and I think, as a lifelong learner and as someone who considers himself an educator first and foremost, having an open mind and open heart to how people present and come at different topics within this field, which at the end of the day, right, is not rocket surgery. Like, it's the basics, and it's been the basics since, the Fessler Triangle came out. We're not pushing that, but how different educators will approach teaching and conveying these concepts that have been embraced and with us for decades. It's magical. Like, as a lifelong learner, as a student, as an educator, sitting in the back of a Rec 1, like, I might pick up my next teaching strategy. I think it's also, it's not lost on me that we can get pretty settled into teaching this stuff in our own little ecosystem, our own little snow climate, our own range or sub-range of mountains. So it's one of the things I feel really blessed by is teaching all over the country and outside of the country. I get to visit these other places, and I constantly have to check in with the basics, like, what does snowpack mean for me in the Maritimes when I'm walking around Colorado, freaked out. When I'm in Colorado and there's 3 feet of snow and there's 12 layers and 10 of them want to kill me, then going to Alaska where there's 800 feet of snow and most of it's all welded together, like that shift in thinking about where I am. It's just one of those things. And we've talked about it before, you and I, being a big part of how we do this is that home turf advantage, having that sense of place, that relationship to place. And that's how you can do this day after day, year after year, decade after decade, is checking in with those basics and how they influence the relationship you're creating in the moment, in the venue that you're at. And as a snow guy and a mountain climber and a backcountry skier, like that's what keeps this stimulating. There's not one single answer and there's not one single venue. And it's that panoply of different options that Mother Nature's going to throw at me that keeps me on my toes and constantly keeps me questioning, like, why is this? And why is this happening? And trying to read the story of a certain place and what would be influencing this next chapter. And I think you see a lot that in education, right? Like in how people convey those concepts based upon the place that they're teaching and the experiences they're having with their students. So
Absolutely.
Dave's definitely onto something sitting in the back of that Rec 1.
And the other thing for me, at least a distinction I've noticed in the, Rec 1 versus Rec 2, that if conditions allow, often I feel like the Rec 1 courses end up being avoid the problem, period, and avoid like the region where the problem exists, wholesale, just avoid it. Where I feel like when instructors have enough experience, the Rec 2 then becomes, how do I work with this problem and get a little bit closer to it? Like starting to layer in that nuance instead of just complete avoidance of everything anywhere near what it could look like.
I know, I'll just say this. Growing up in the 80s, the Just Say No, Nancy Reagan campaign only made me more curious about why I was supposed to say no to things. And I think if you take a just say no approach to interacting with terrain of consequence, that's where curiosity is going to kill that cat. We find it fairly disingenuous to have students come to us to learn about avalanche terrain and not go visit avalanche terrain. Now, that's also with the big caveat of modeling appropriate, less dangerous decision making with an eye to the daily hazard rating and the individual problem or problems that are lurking beneath our feet. Like there's a whole host of toggles on the soundboard that make up our risk acceptance for that day. But to just take a blanket, we don't engage, this is a Rec 1, you can move under, over, through, and around avalanche terrain at all levels of training. And that just might be the best model, the best educational experience for your students. So we are the Avalanche, we're definitely not a just say no outfit.
How do you feel about the instructor's experience and or knowledge versus their ability to provide that and the actual product that gets provided? Because what I often see from students, especially coming out of Rec 1, is just avoid, I am scared of avalanche terrain. And that's the outcome.
Permission to speak freely? You're going to get me in trouble,
Send
Maury.
it.
So I cannot define anyone's relationship with risk. My relationship with risk acceptance, my relationship with exposure and vulnerability is a very personal choice that I make. And that relationship changes throughout the day and over time. We are a sum of our parts, and our experiences are a force multiplier in the summation of who we are. And I am not going to tell anybody that they need to go in terrain or they need to stay out of terrain. Where I think introductory Rec 1 education, what I think we should focus on is empowering students to be able to read the story of what's going on around them in the backcountry, in the mountains. And then they can balance that comprehension of what they see happening with their own level of risk acceptance. I'm not telling anybody they should engage or not. If you're going to engage, here's the three legs of the stool that you should see if exists. And if those three things exist, then the potential for an avalanche exists. If you want to take one of those legs of the stool away, right, you're not going to have a problem with avalanche. You might have a problem with broken gear. You could get lost. You could be benighted. It's an uncontrollable environment out in the mountains, and we control nothing. And it's really for the individual user to decide how much uncertainty they want to adopt on whatever mission they're on whatever particular day. And I think if we take that approach as educators, we're empowering our students. Good education is empowerment. If I empower you with information, the more information you have, the more competent your actions, your behaviors, your decisions are going to be. And then balance that with reps, right? We all have to be out there. There's a certain currency that you need to maintain. It's really dangerous if you become an off the couch Avalanche interfacer, right? Like this is something that from the first flakes in early winter until it all goes down the Rio, right? Problems become problems till they all melt away, and it's a story you gotta track from day one. You can't casually interface with this. But if you don't have that type of commitment or time to give to it, avoidance can be a very shrewd, a very appropriate tactic.
Totally. And it's the guaranteed one that works every time, as long as your
Yeah,
ability to read terrain is adequate.
and I know that, that being the main audience that we speak to in this podcast, right? And you and I's different experiences working with different tactical, military, law enforcement outfits. Not every outfit is blessed with a 2-month workup in winter terrain. You may get your tuckus dropped in somewhere where that you have no relationship to that turf, and avoidance is like the only way you're going to have mission success versus, hey, I can go out and I can live in this environment and really develop a relationship with it. And now I can move the team more through the terrain because I have a better understanding. And sometimes we're just not afforded that on both
Totally.
sides of the aisle, rec or professional. Yeah. And I think we're playing a long game with this. I only have my job because everybody in front of me is dead or burnt out. And if I want to keep doing this job, um, it is a slow, steady burn of observation and comprehension of what Mother Nature's doing out there. And if I try to rush it, if I try to like fight my way into the bar, it's going off the rails. I just want to fight my way out of the bar when I'm in there and I'm like, whoa, I made a horrible assessment here. Um, but that's how it works. And I think
And then
that's
it's
how we
time.
should be approaching.
Then it's time for an error correction. And if you don't know how to make an error correction to the reality that you're experiencing, then you're a little too committed, either in the form of ego or terrain or enemy or whatever.
Yeah, it's amazing how that cognitive process can override what it is we know or think we should know. And that's a whole host of things there. That's a whole different podcast.
Yeah. Well, and I'll dive into some of the rec versus pro stuff, and then also climbing versus skiing with Karen, because I'm intending to have her on
Great.
at a later point as well. But what I wanted to transition to talking with you is either the pro Av SAR, pro Avalanche Search and Rescue stuff, or the SAS dog, the Avalanche dog training stuff. So which one would you like to transition into first, since they're your area of expertise?
We can talk about the dog program real quick, just because it's a snippet, it's a snapshot, it's a work in progress. SAS Dog really came about as a result of my own journey becoming a canine handler. And I have some wonderful mentors as part of that journey, both folks at the school and beyond, very much rooted in the Colorado Rapid Avalanche Deployment Group, CRAD. Folks like John Reller and Chris Johnson, Jake Hutchinson, who's at AAI. These are all folks that were super pivotal for me. My background, I may have mentioned this on your show before, but I was the son to a dog handler in Vietnam, and dog handling was what my dad did when he went to Vietnam, and it was always the piece of this industry that I was fairly reluctant to take on.
And your current dog made a guest appearance on our last podcast
Oh,
in
that's
the
right. She
background.
wouldn't shut up. That's right. That's right. We were sitting at the kitchen table. Poor Lulu, making all the noise. So I always knew that, like, when whether it's like guiding or snow science or mitigation or operations, like, had a great career doing a lot of things. And the canine piece was something I had never had approached. But I always felt that the universe would tell me when it was the right time to go after the dog piece, because it is a multi-year journey. This isn't like rescuing a dog from the pound and being like, oh, they can find people under the snow. It's definitely an art and a science to handling. We had a string of really bad avalanches, avalanche accidents, avalanche recoveries in the San Juans a number of years back, and one I talk about frequently. Split our team on egress. It was a gigantic D4, very destructive slide, barely missed team members. And the moral of that
And
story,
D4 is a nearly historic level of slide or
it's
size.
yeah, it's one rung down in the D scale. It's one rung down from like a landscape altering event. This is definitely a slide that could bury and easily kill you. It can take out infrastructure. It is a massive event. And this slide happened during a February warm up. So it was of the wet character, which is just monstrous and powerful and sets up like concrete.
And heavy.
Heavy, and we were so heads down in the holes doing victim recovery that we had missed some signs and we stayed out too long. And just there's some like very legitimate after action stress that came out of that. Dare I say some PTSD, and as a way for me to kind of regain some power, and to feel better about having a role where I'm out there not only doing the thing with my team but trying to keep them safe. um, it was apparent to me, I had the light bulb moment, that if we had had a dog on this recovery, we could have truncated the resolution. We could have taken that temporal scale and shrunk it down. We could have been out there in and out in less time, and
Totally.
it was a resource that we were missing on this side of the San Juans. Telluride's got a great dog program, but La Plata, Silverton, we just didn't have that resource available to us.
When
And it
you
was
say you'd be able to get out of there sooner, how exactly do you mean?
like we got this particular incident was deep burials. So we're talking like, of the three recovered customers, the shallowest one was over 20 feet deep. These were extractions with power tools. These guys were part of the landscape at that point after this violent event. We had some challenges, and depending on who you ask, and we've asked everybody, we had some challenges with what the victims' transceivers were doing. And we were struggling with the second and third recovery. Like, were they close proximity, or were we getting a phantom signal? Were we getting some sort of, due to like highly metallic bedrock in the San Juans, were we getting some sort of like echo from the signal flux? There was some weird stuff going on when we were trying to identify the location of the last two folks. And what we ended up doing is committing to a recovery site that we thought we're going to find two people. And when it turns out, we only have one person in there. And so it ended up sending us into additional mission periods to go back out there and find our third customer. If we were able to perforate the snow and get a dog's nose in there, they are remarkable tools. And just through reading my dog's body language, she tells me, like, when we're training or when it's validation for her test to be a Abby dog, like when the scene is clear and she cannot identify the presence of human scent, she goes into fuck off mode. She's like, Dad, this is done. And if I keep trying to make her work, she will, because she's a dutiful partner. But eventually she'll just be like, I told you there's nothing going on here. And had we had that resource, and we could have transcended just using human technology, which was stumping us for reasons still undetermined, you're not going to fool that dog. And then we could have had the dog start working other portions of the scene, get a location quicker, and ultimately not have to expose the team to the same terrain that just, took three human lives. So that's how we shorten it, is we're more efficient out there. Dogs are an amazing tool to leverage in an organized avalanche response on small team organized rescue. So
To put
that was this.
to put some numbers or some specificity to it, on a side-by-side comparison of a rescue either you've been on or just a scenario, what is the time frame comparison between a human or even a human team and a dog?
It's tough. It's a tough question to answer. I'll go where we do in our military trainings, right? Like slow is smooth and smooth is fast, but fast is fucking faster. And I've seen dogs move faster than the most competent rescuer out there. They can, they have naturally built in 4x4 mode. They can move over the snow. You'll hear all sorts of stats about like, we smell 8 different ways and the dog smells 10,000 different way, like receptors in the nose. And I think the best analogy I've heard is like, we walk into the house and we come home and our partner's making dinner and we're like, soup. And a dog comes in and is like, onion, potato, carrot. Like, it can identify and it can break down, it can differentiate the different cones of scent that it's taking in through its olfactory system. So if we as handlers can train the dog to focus in on appropriate scent, human scent, and then we can train them to show us they're interested and then show us indication, right? So my dog's interest is she'll be scanning a scene. It's kind of like walking a basic search like a human would in Avalanche Rescue. And then when she hits that scent cone, wherever it is in the debris, her head will snap. And that's her head will snap and then her tail flattens out in the middle because she's a black lab. So that's her interest. And I, as the handler, need to be attentive to be like, ooh, she's on to something. And then she just kind of grids in and like slowly shrinks that available real estate to check. And when she's on top of it, when she knows she is like, I got the soup right here, she's been trained to indicate with a dig because they're avalanche dogs. We want them digging. Other search work, it may be a bark alert. It may be a body bump like in Lost, like go, come back to me, bump me, bring me to the lost person. But hers is, I watch for the head snap. She's identified that scent cone. I work her through the scene. And then she starts digging. And when she starts digging, it's showtime. It's not a false positive. It's on. And I can only share Lucille like a proud papa, but when she did her validation test, you can bring the dog to wherever you want to start the test from. It's 100 by 100 meter area. We actually like walked over one of the buried victims. Victims are 2 meters deep, completely buried under the snow. So she had already like, they're going to be dirty, rotten cheaters if they can, which is great. We want them to be quick, but she had already found where the first person was. So when it was time to play the game and I said the magic word SEARCH, just making sure she's not at my feet here.
Yeah.
She had that first, she went into that dig in 15 seconds. And that was basically the time it took for her to run to that spot. And then I think she had the second buried victim at 4 minutes, and you have 20 minutes to do the test. So it's very impressive. These dogs that are tuned up, she's like Michael Jordan prime right now. She's a 4-year-old. She's trained with all these other studs and studettes in the state. When they're firing, it's a hard tool to beat. Now there's all sorts of things that can make them unreliable. And I think I would be remiss not to mention dogs don't work super well when it's super cold. Scenes can get corrupted. We can have
Too many
initial
people.
yeah, like we can have they're trained to work around people, they're trained to work around other dogs, but we can definitely have a scene get corrupted and that can throw the dogs off. A well-trained dog isn't going to do the like, they're going to eat the person's lunch. Like when she's working, the reward, she's praise-based, so she just gets a lot of good girls and a lot of playtime at the end of doing it. She's locked in. But if you have a lot of people moving throughout that scene, if you have people digging on false positives, it can throw a dog off, or it can just mitigate, like you can lose the scent. So there are environmental considerations that we want to keep in mind as the human, as the handler, to really set the dog up for success. So
Right on.
so that's kind of like the science and how we train them and what these dogs do.
And to offer a bit of a comparison, like because Lulu's validation test was 100 meter by 100 meter area with two 2-meter burials in that case, and she had air to them in about a little over 4 minutes. And the pro or the guide test comparison, like the pro 1 comparison is 2 victims buried about 1 meter deep within a 50-meter square area, if I remember correctly. And the passing standard is 7 to 8 minutes.
Yeah, we've made it easier for the humans. And if you go through the AMJ program,
it's probe only, no dig.
We've made it a little bit more difficult. And with the new pro product that we're going to talk about maybe a little bit later on this morning, we're increasing the difficulty of those tests so that they can be more emblematic of stress and challenge in the real world.
Totally.
Yeah, I would say the current rescue test that we've been giving is it's pretty easy and dogs shatter that. You know, the dogs, it could be 0 to 3, so you don't know how many people you're looking for. Like, basically, the scenario stops when you articulate to the evaluator that the field of play is devoid of human scent. I never wanna say, "Yeah, no one else is buried." Shit happens, and I don't wanna ever have that much confidence. What I wanna articulate is my partner, the dog, is not picking up any sign of human scent, because we may use other tools at that point to try to clear the field.
Totally.
So yeah, it's a tough test for sure. I mean, it's just another day playing in the snow for her, but I was pretty stressed out. And it's and any handler worth their salt will tell you it's just the beginning. Like, it is just the start of Lucille had an injury and then I had a big injury, so we were a little bit delayed, but you're typically talking 2.5 to 3 years, 3 seasons to get a dog validated. And that's where the real work begins. That's where you have to now go out and train with your partner, train with your team. How are you getting dogs in and out of the field based upon your mission profile? Here in San Juan County, pretty heavy snowmobiles, helicopters, and skinning. It's a lot different than a dog that's going to work at the resort, which is like, we're going to ride the lift and run downhill, all stuff. So that's what led to SAS Dog. We started working with CRAD as like a southern outpost for their training camps. So Front Range heavy, Summit County, like this is where the program was born. Uh, CRAD came out of Summit County, came out of dogs and handlers having kind of this reciprocal relationship with Flight for Life and sheriff departments up there, where if a local SAR team, if a local sheriff knows that I'm like working patrol Monday through Friday, if shit hits the fan, they can call dispatch at my mountain. The helicopter can come pick me up at Loveland, and I can fly somewhere to have a really good chance at a rescue as a dog team. A little bit different in the South. We tend to be removed and pretty far away. A lot of us are sledding deep into the backcountry to just start our day. So we started training with CRAD in the southern part of the state. Number one, to deal with all the southern teams, your Tellurides, your Taos down in New Mexico. But also, it's a different flavor. It's a little bit more austere, dare I say, a little bit more wilderness feel for dog training down south in southern Colorado. And it's been great. So that's basically what SAS Dog has become. It's been an outpost for CRAD to work its magic. And quite frankly, if we weren't so busy with all the other 7 departments at the school, we'd probably do more with SAS Dog.
Yeah.
Um,
And to put it simply, the first time I visited Silverton in the southwest of Colorado in the San Juans, the thing that stuck with me that somebody said, that Josh said, was this mountain range kills people every year. And it is a more serious, more complex mountain range than many others throughout the United States, despite being kind of a small region.
yeah, I mean, it's the whole. I just go back to thinking about the Lucille's origin story. Like, why I have her was wanting to give me a little bit more power, a little bit more control in a very uncontrollable environment. And I don't
Absolutely.
think, you know, I think there, as a handler and as part of my training, I am constantly running the algorithm about like, where would we actually have a chance for a live find? And that looks a lot like, hey, I'm on duty, rescue packs are ready to go, dog is with me, something happens at a local ski area, something happens in the closer to the road portion of the backcountry, and I can get on scene quickly, right? We know that survivability window has shrunk for us. We're basically looking at 10 minutes, 10 minutes. But if I can share my duty schedule with other stakeholders in the region and we can quickly get the dog on scene, she's got a good chance at a live find. I think her career um, will more often than not be defined by recoveries, and that's just the reality of dog.
And this is a more of a hypothetical and me asking a question because I'm not super familiar with working dogs or dog stuff. I'm curious on your thoughts of the application for the military of having a working dog with some sort of avalanche training, because especially when you get to the larger organizational scale where you say have a platoon or a company where you have 40, 100 people moving, not everybody has transceivers, not everybody has equipment, but like maybe you've trained a unit to do a probe line at that point, ideally, but that's about it. What would be the application of a working dog, and or like would it be feasible in your mind to have a working dog if you're in a military like mountain environment?
Definitely feasible. I don't think the PJs have their dog. Hutch would be a better person to ask about this, but um, if you had teams, like specifically a team, a small unit team devoted to search and rescue, the dog's capabilities transcend military civilian, like they're just their SAR capabilities. The way these dogs are trained is to play what we call the quote unquote the game. And the game is the same whether you're looking for drugs, explosives, people. You're leveraging the sensory abilities of the animal to discover something whose location is not known. So the game is the same. You're just training the dog to give different interest and indication signals based upon what we're actually looking for, right? There's no, oh, doesn't Lulu doesn't need to live her life out as just an avalanche dog. We started to cross train into wilderness, into search for lost people. We've got a number of, like Josh said about the San Juans, we got a number of customers still missing out in the Weminuche, Colorado's largest wilderness area. We're trying to bring up a couple HRD dogs in our local team.
What's HRD?
A human remain
Okay.
detection. So it's like the dog can be trained to utilize its exceptional abilities to do whatever task we want. So to your question, could a dog be used in a tactical capacity to, do explosives one day, apprehension the next day, avalanche the next day? Yeah. I mean, the sky's the limit. They are brilliantly intelligent animals. Um, will the military have the time, funding, and bandwidth to focus on creating a tool like that, or will they want a specialist, right? Like this dog does this. And, in the civilian world, like a lot's on the handler. You know, I might get the, pun intended, I might get the random bone thrown to me by the team or from a nonprofit for healthcare or food, but like there's a huge personal investment in rearing these animals and training these animals. And I think about how dogs have been done in the military before. I think it's a much more compassionate program nowadays, but it breaks my heart to think about euthanizing the dogs that were being used in Vietnam. Like those tools, those partners weren't coming home. They had one job, they did it super well, and when we were done with them, we were literally done with them. So how that works, how that works in big army, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who funds that. I don't know what division, what unit, what line of effort takes that on. But can they do it? 100%. 100%. And I know that's often what you're about, Maury, is really like pushing the edges of like, why aren't we looking at this? And I would say with the canine piece, absolutely, it's feasible.
Well,
Absolutely.
I think it's worth considering as an option, not necessarily the primary job of that animal, but if we don't have the equipment at the organizational level, then it is a way to get after a potential problem and mitigate a potential hazard.
Totally. And you brought up like, what if they're not wearing transceivers? Like, just to go down a kind of a geeky rescue rabbit hole here, right? Like, we see the push that the SafeBack system is making coming out of Norway, right? Will would be an interesting person for you to talk to at some point. But
I highly doubt the military would invest in that for organizations.
yeah, but I'm just saying, like, if it came down to having everybody like learn a transceiver, or I just have a tube on my pack that allows me to blow air in my face and persist longer under the snow, right? Like we see some promising statistics coming out about burial times when you have supplemental air under there with you. Now I throw a dog in the mix in the company, in the unit. And so now, I've got a cost effective solution because it's not only just buying the equipment, but it's time and money spent in training. And now I've got this like passive system that if troops go under the snow, We buy them more time as long as
Yeah,
there's not
totally.
trauma involved, and then the dog just works the scene. So like being open to 21st century solutions will change the tools, the tactics, the techniques that we're using. And as different technologies become more readily available and cheaper, you could start looking at using the canine in a different way than we've looked at prior.
Yeah,
That's
and
all.
like even just that small discussion on the safe back did change my perspective on it in a tactical application because it makes it so that if you are reacting to contact and you have some sort of any enemy contact, you have the time now to take care of that since the typical burial survival drops dramatically once you pass 15 minutes. But those systems increase burial survival and ultimately that like if a bullet is a more immediate death than burial is, then you have that protection of snow, which is providing attenuation of rounds too.
You can adjust the survivability algorithm and the threats to the user, to the traveler in so many different ways, right? And um, but what's going to be the greatest good for the greatest many? I think pushing the military as you do to think about new ways to think about sustainability and survival, like that's a really cool frontier, and I know that's been the source of a lot of great conversations you and I have had. And yeah, I think dogs can play a huge role in that. I remembered Sean's term and like kind of the line of thinking that I was on. So not to give you more editing work, but all right, we're good. So in talking about the Rec 2, Sean had challenged us in the spring to, instead of thinking about people that participate in the Rec 2 as Rec Curious, let's change the nomenclatures. Or yeah, as Pro Curious, let's change the nomenclature to Pro Serious and use that positive reframe of the term to guide what are we actually doing in the Rec 2. When the split happened, the Rec 2, like the decision wasn't made to drop the Rec 2 from the progression. It's kind of weird that you do the Rec 1, the Rec Rescue, and then there's this redheaded stepchild course that, isn't part of what you need to get into the pro lane. What happened is that we butted up against the calendar. We said we'd have the pro program rolled out in 2017, and here we were in 2017, and we didn't have a solution for the Rec 2. And so the consensus amongst the very small group of people steering the ship was like, we're going to revisit this. And it is now in A3's strategic plan to revisit that. I think under Jason Simon Jones' leadership as the A3 Rec director, we're going to see the Rec 2 come to prominence, really develop itself. But I felt Sean was incredibly astute, suggesting that we reframe how we talk about people, kind of peeking over the boards into that next lane, the pro lane, and not say they're pro curious, just say they're pro serious. And
Totally.
via the capstone experience on the rec side of the aisle, we provide a kind of a taster of what's to come. We set the hook for what it means to be a professional. And that's really the deal, right? Recreational folks are out there because they enjoy what they're doing. Professionals are being cultivated to be operational. And even at the different tiers of professional training, there's different ways we talk about those professionals, right? Like at the basic level, the Pro 1 level, we are rearing you up. We are grooming you to be a professional contributor to an organization.
Yeah.
We're
And,
not,
and if I were to say it in a short sentence for Rec 2 versus Pro 1, Rec 2 is taking an advanced recreationalist further. And I really like to encourage, and this is my personal opinion, people to go into a different snowpack or a snowpack they're not as familiar with for the Rec 2, whereas I like to encourage them to do the Rec 1 in their home area.
That's smart. That's super smart. And the Rec 2 should be a panoply of experiences and opportunities that isn't just getting gnarly. Like there definitely needs to be a day of route finding and more advanced terrain management. And we're all out there to like get the turns or send the climb. Like that's very much a part of it. But there are other components of this craft of both this art and science of leading in the backcountry that need to be a part of the rec course.
Totally.
As Pro 1, you're a contributor. Pro 2, you're
In
a
Pro
leader.
1, the way I describe Pro 1 is it's a professional translation course.
Yeah, you're learning the secret language, right? You can hopefully make observations and go gather data and not end up dead. That helps the bigger machine crank out a hazard rating and a terrain assessment. Yeah, so you go from contributor to leader, and the rec side, you're going to hear this from me a lot today, but the rec side should mirror that. At Silverton, we say level 1, the theme of that course is learning to read the story of the winter backcountry. Our rec 2 is learning to lead in the winter backcountry. So we go from reading to leading, we go from contributing to leading, and that's a solid development no matter what side of the Rec Pro split you're on.
Yeah, and Pro 2 is organizational leadership, which can be a two-person organization of you're out guiding, or it can be ski patrol, like organizational risk management mitigation, and tying that over into the tactical. You've worked with both professional recreational side, like ski patrol, SAR, guides, and you've also worked with tactical. Have you seen a difference, and if so, what, between the tactical folks as they start to learn that material versus a recreational user?
Civilians are always going to be blessed to take a much deeper dive into what has their attention. And when I am training the military, I have their attention for as long as I have their attention. And then they are on to a new problem set, a new training objective, right? Like if a unit, a platoon is doing a workup and they come to me, it's because I'm part of their winter training. But they could be then scuba diving, four-wheeling, close quarters, like you name it, they're off to doing something next. So oftentimes we focus on the efficacy and impact of what we do with our military groups, like at SASTAC, being like, I got to get you to be super good enough with the time that I'm afforded here. I can't take this deep down, this deep dive down the rabbit hole. I just don't have that enough time with you. So I really have to prioritize what's the most important items to learn, to consider, to practice while you're under my tutelage, because you're going to leave and next week you're going to be doing something totally different. Next month, next mission, next deployment. And you're going to need to recall this stuff that we did when the mission calls for it. And so oftentimes the military training becomes much more prescriptive. I as an educator, I always want it to be like student centric, and I want it to be guided inquiry and a lot of experiential discovery. Well, Uncle Sam, the clock's ticking. We only have so much to do this. And oftentimes the groups we work with are getting tuned up to go do a thing. We have to become super good enough so we can go get the mission done. And that's just the reality of tactical work, tactical training.
And from what I'm hearing, my initial question was going to be, how do you approach the tactical differently from the Rec or Pro? But you answered that. And it sounds like essentially because of how many different things they have to train for and how many distractions and how many different skills there are, prescriptive, almost checklist driven approach is what it sounds like you've been using and needing to use.
Yes, and not a yes, but, and that needs to be balanced with professional war fighters' abilities to leverage critical thinking. No soldier is ever going to encounter the same problem set twice. It might look similar, but day, mission, enemy, it's always going to change. And so it can't be so prescriptive that it's, this one size in the want to make it muscle memory, that there's no adaptation, there's no flex in the moment to deal with the adversary at hand, whether that be natural world or, the enemy. And so it's a fine balance, Maury, between, um, you know, typically the military students that I have in front of me they've done it enough, they're experienced enough that they are like some of the best students I will ever have. Like they're really good students. And they can do a call and recall. Like we can just skill and drill, but the military and specifically the groups that SASTAC's working with, we never shy away from the students want to know the why behind the what. Because if we can spend time talking about the why behind the what, they can then use that knowledge in an emergent capacity to solve, which we will never be able to estimate what they're going to have to solve. And
And the
so it's
really
this.
cool thing I've noticed with tactical folks is a lot of this seems to connect way faster because they are used to thinking in the way the Avalanche world does, because the risk mitigation mindset for both is based actually in the same OSHA frameworks. And in the Avalanche world, it is hazard and then treatment, the way we talk about it. And in the military world, if you look at it, a deliberate risk assessment worksheet for the Army, it is hazard and then control.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you give your residual risk level as a result of the hazard, the control, the exposure. And so that language is already there, and that way of thinking is already there, that a recreationalist, separate from rec versus pro training, may not think in that flow or that style. Whereas military folks have already done it for a lot of time, whether they're coming from dive, whether they're coming from jumping, operations, whatever.
I would agree. I would agree. That formulaic approach that we almost take for granted with the military groups can really amplify outcomes. And it makes me think about, we will see in the future, and I don't speak for A3, I just work very closely with A3 as a professional provider. We're going to see another level of pro training in the United States. Like we will eventually see a pro 3. So, you're a contributor and now you're a leader, on a mitigation team, or you're the leader of your small group, or your task force. But what does it mean to be like command? Right? And like we think about that in civilian professional avalanche operations, like, okay, now I'm the snow safety director. I'm not just like leading on the hill on a run list or on a mitigation morning, like where I'm going to throw my shots and how I'm going to keep my people safe. Now I'm the person coming in at 2 in the morning, figuring out how many teams do I have and where do I send them? And I project out, like, what is that translation going to look like in the tactical space? Like, what's the pro 3 for military members? Because we've seen the military start to embrace pro education. And so what does it look like for command to be thinking about these things?
And to be honest, I'd almost argue that the military is ahead on that, or take out the almost. I'd argue that the military is ahead on it because they already think in that way.
Sure.
Commanders are already trained to plan in that way, and it just has to be translated to a new context. But it still has the same problems because we plan for terrain
And
already, and we plan for weather already. It's a translation to a new context.
And I think the key word you add in there was the control piece, right? C2, command and control. And so hopefully as we develop this on the civilian side, it won't be as heavy a lift to integrate it into the tactical pathway because you're already thinking about that. C2 is the bedrock of everything going on there. So we
And I
can.
think that's what I've seen the tactical folks I've worked with and we've trained pick up faster, is the bigger picture. How do they adjust the plan for the given conditions? Whereas understanding some of the minutia, which can be important, but it can also be superfluous and extra, is stuff that they need more time on because they don't do it every day like an advanced recreationalist or like a pro snow person does.
Yeah, and as long as these trainings have a high enough level of fidelity, right? Like everybody needs to decompress and there needs to be a good deal trip every now and again. But the good deal trips, you're not gonna, like, develop these skills by osmosis and then have them recalled when you need them, right? It
Well,
needs to
shoot,
be.
that's a whole nother topic, right? For the mental well being and the decompression. Like the British military has built in adventure training that they have their PT trained soldiers or their fitness trained folks like lead, where it could be mountain biking, could be climbing, etc. And that's
Yeah.
built in to their structure, which is really cool.
It's a work up, it's a work down, it's all very much important in when you think about human development and just we as, professionals being asked to do what we do on either side of the aisle, and no matter what sector there is, you gotta work up, you gotta work down. I mean, Josh and I, we've been on your show before, we talked, like, we met doing a fair amount of decompression trips. They were kind of like good deal. Let's go reconnect with nature. They were for active duty personnel. But there was, a lot of camaraderie in the evenings and a lot of great days on the chair at ski resorts. Um, but what we congealed around what he and I really saw as like the vacuum, the space we wanted to fill, it was like, let's have a higher level of training that really speaks to this level of competence and also confidence where we need guys to be at, when the defecation is hitting the oscillation. And, you've been a part of that. You know what those trainings look like. They look a little bit different than your typical, let's go to Tahoe and drink, which is super important.
And that's what happens. I would argue the let's go to Tahoe and drink is something that already happens on a weekend basis,
Fair.
regardless of where you're at from the military.
Nobody likes a quitter, right?
Exactly. And then you also get some of the folks that we have seen where they can't make it up 100-foot boot pack
Yeah, they're just torched.
because they are toast after 5 days out.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're tough sports, right? Like the cognitive load when we're introducing new objective hazards and environmental dangers on top of the physical strain of asking guys to do things, ice climbing, backcountry skiing. Training is tough. So yeah, I think there is a lot of value to the good deal trips, the decommission, just the fun, the camaraderie, the decompression, all of that is just as necessary. And then I also think kicking ass and taking names during training is how we get better, and stay the strongest nation.
And we're over an hour, so I think we'll have to reschedule to talk pro AVSAR at some point just to keep this from getting too long. And that's normal for us as we talk,
Man,
where an hour call turns into a 2-hour call.
we get down these like really geeky rabbit holes that I'm not sure anybody wants to hear about but you and I. But yeah, thanks for the opportunity, and
But
always love the conversation.
Yeah, so my normal questions you've already answered for the wrap up. So I'm going to ask you one off the cuff,
All right.
which is if you're given the keys to the kingdom to change one thing within the Avalanche world, what would you go after?
I think that we are at a critical juncture in the United States, both in the development of our nation's students and with how other nations are going to take us seriously, specifically talking to you, Canada, with the rigor that we are going to maintain and ask of students. And I saw things fracture. Fracture is not really a good word. I saw some deviation when the AMGA created a more strenuous test for mountain guides because they felt like the snow pro world wasn't raising the bar enough with what could confront professional mountain guides. If I had the keys to the kingdom, I would want to widen the lens and ask the question, what do all snow pros, forecasters, ski patrollers, professional SAR, mountain guides, like where do we collectively and how do we collectively raise the bar for all different tentacles within that snow pro octopus so that we remain the standard bearer for international best practice? Like I don't think we should be lessening standards. I don't think we should be creating learning spaces that feel friendlier or less accountable just so everybody feels good at the end of the day. I think we need to uphold the highest bar we can as a country. And so if I really had those keys and I somewhat get to talk about opening that door in the position that I hold, but I want to make sure that we are as educationally rigorous and as impactful. I just want excellence in education in this country. And I want us to be one of the lodestars for what it looks like to be a snow professional. And I think we've wobbled a little bit in past years, and different arms of that octopus have looked to strengthen their arm, but we are so much more, we're stronger than the sum of our parts. Like we have to hang together on this. And the different demographics that are within the snow world, hopefully under the leadership of our in-industry advocacy group, the American Avalanche Association. I hope A3 leads us to a place where we can look at snow pros in the US, whether they're warfighters, whether they're ski patrollers, whether they're highway forecasters, and we can say with confidence that these are the best people in the world. We uphold the highest standards, we have the most rigorous trainings, and that's what I'm using my keys for in that question.
Right on. And then because I like to ask two, and this one, I'm curious to hear what you have to say on it. I have my own strong feelings on it, and I'm curious on your thoughts about if you feel it is appropriate and or should tactical professionals be in a mixed classroom with other professions when getting pro training, or should it be separate, and why?
I think when you can cross pollinate, when you can take the experience, the individual experience of learners within an educational setting, I think the environment becomes richer. I think it's very easy for a tactical student to blend into, let's say, a civilian setting. I could see a lot of problems trying to bring civilians into that tactical world. Like I don't think I see seamless reciprocity or sharing of ideas there. Like, yeah, like give me a bunch of military students and let's put them in a professional setting. I don't I think that can be really rich for them, but I also think there would be a shortcoming with the contribution that the military students could. Just because that's not the civilians' world. I mean, not to get too much into our cultural climate, but there's civilian students that would be downright opposed to even sharing that space, unfortunately. So, yeah, good question. Tough answer.
I have strong feelings on that the rec can totally be separate, and
Why?
that's fine to be separate because it's a completely different context. The amount of people that you have out, the decision making, the planning, I think that it is different. And I think that a person can take a recreational course and do their own thing, but I think the military can and should provide the recreational training on their
Like
own.
in-house.
Yep. Yep. And then I see the professional training as a way to bring it back together and keep things standardized and cross pollinate, as you were saying. Just like, for example, pilots have to go through FAA training and like pass an FAA certification. That's a federal civilian requirement, even though they're
Sure,
doing it in the military.
sure,
I think
sure.
there's value in the cross pollination still at that professional level where there is some sort of standard being held that is not necessarily rigorous, but is justified against a deep experience in that part of the field.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see where you went with that and how you parse that out. I mean, this has been the Rec Pro conversation that we've been having today. I see it in how we staff our pro programs, right? It's like I want the mountain guide, I want the ski patroller, I want the highway forecaster, and that collection, that cadre of instructors make up the Pro 2 team. Because if they're not hearing from all voices, not only do they not know the unique skill sets that each one of those professionals brings to the snow world, you're also uh, kind of falling short with your students in exposing them another professional lane that they could pursue. Like, oh man, I could ski patrol, but once my knees go, driving around in the truck on 550, looking up at the paths, like that may be a good transition for me when I'm older in my career. And I'm not saying forecasters are old; they can definitely hold their own, but it's like that, like like you said, it's that diversity of perspectives and paradigms that make for a richer course. See
And
what you did
scale.
and scale, 100%. I see what you did there with the rec piece and bringing that in-house. How would that in your brain, to flip the script here and ask you the question,
Totally.
how would that be an education, a pedigree that would then translate when somebody got out of the military? Like, would my military level one, would it follow, would it correlate to the same proficiency and guidelines we have for like a rec student in the US?
I would love for that to be the case because there is so much military training that happens that does not translate in any way. And I think that the same stuff being, or the same curriculum being applied, but the translation of that curriculum is different, and the application of that curriculum is different. And the example I use often is, for example, a linear danger area in a tactical setting is a road or a railway or a stream or some sort of open area. It can also be called an open danger area, and that's an avalanche path. And by talking about it in that way, that tells a person who is tactically minded how to approach that piece of terrain already. And they're already thinking through, how do I change the spacing of my organization? How do I change my movement pattern, my movement formation, without me needing to say anything else, because they're already tactically minded. So there's some key translations
That's the word,
that do need to
translation.
happen, and I think are appropriate at the tactical level for a tactical professional to teach other tactical professionals, that a recreational person, like a mountain guide, is great at what they do at a 1-to-1 or a 1-to-3 ratio, but they are not the most appropriate person to be teaching a recreational course. Now, I could see an awesome opportunity for a tactical person to be combined with a mountain guide or ski patrol focused person, because that other professional has a lot more practical experience as well.
And that's how we see it a lot, like with the SASTAC trainings that you and I do, right? We're going to team up like a snow pro who might be a civilian with a veteran of, small unit tactics. And together they're going to riff on, what does this all mean for this demographic that we're working with? And that's been brilliant. That's
Yep.
been brilliant.
And at the same time, at the initial introductory level or recreational level 1, you don't need that to tell a person how to identify an avalanche slope.
Sure. And you said it. I love that you put the word translation to that. So it's a translation effort. I also say it's a tempo thing, right? Like the training tempo can be a lot different with the tactical group, just by nature of having professional learners in front of you all the time, even if it's rec
And different,
curriculum.
and generally higher fitness.
Yeah. Every day is Sunday fun day in the military.
Right on, Mike. Well, thanks for joining. I know
Yeah,
we had
man.
intended to talk some other stuff as well, but we'll just have to circle back on that at some point.
Let's make that happen. There's a tremendous amount of momentum in the professional rescue side of things in the US. And something that I'm always willing to bloviate on. I'm really excited to talk about. Even coming into this season, there's new products out there. So
Yeah.
let's
Do you
definitely
want
get
to
some white space.
give like a few minute teaser on that, or do you want to save it?
We're nearing the end of a multi-year effort to really address some learning gaps, some skill gaps within specifically rescue on the professional side of the aisle in the US.
And what were those skill gaps?
Essentially advanced avalanche rescue skills. So currently right now, folks are really good at companion rescue, and we can get you really good thinking about multiple burials. So, like if I can get you to do a companion rescue, a multiple with 21st century technology is just a companion stacked and a companion smashing a flagging button in between. But once we get to being a member of a strike force, we get to more complex. We spoke about in today's conversation multiple burials, deep burials. Like there's a lot of more complicated, more complex skills that we have failed to provide a learning opportunity for in the current educational progression in the U.S. And those opportunities are coming, and they'll be found on the pro side of the aisle. So yeah, let's get it on the calendar. Let's talk about those things. Awesome, buddy. Appreciate you.
Welcome to the after show for the discussion with Mike Ackerman, aka, and he came back on because I wanted to talk a topic that could maybe, I don't know, be valuable to the military, and that is talking about military working dogs, or working dogs in the outdoor space rather, because I was curious how or if the avalanche dog training could be leveraged for military working dogs in the tactical context, because not when we integrate, especially at the conventional level, with avalanche terrain, as of right now, the way we run things in the military, not every person's going to have avalanche rescue kit, including a beacon or all the gear. Additionally, the avalanche rescue gear puts off a digital signal, which, given the current environment, could be something that units are wanting to avoid. So avalanche dogs are a tool or a resource that can be leveraged to fill in some of that gap when interfacing with avalanche terrain, potentially, maybe. Now, one of the things I want to talk, because we talked about the recreational and the professional split in avalanche education, is a lot of folks ask me about like where the value is in the professional versus the recreational tracks. And so to qualify for the pro level 1 and the recreational level 2, you have to take avalanche level 1 and avalanche rescue for both of those. The split happens once you complete avalanche level 1 and avalanche rescue. The order of those two doesn't matter. From there, you can go to either the pro 1 or the avalanche recreational level 2. What I've seen with the little bit of teaching of these professional level courses that I've done is that the folks who have taken the avalanche level 2 come in so much more prepared because they're just more experienced and better trained about how to manage terrain given a higher avalanche hazard and how to interface with that terrain instead of just complete avoidance. So if you're going to take an avalanche level 2, if you're going to take a professional level avalanche course, I strongly encourage taking a level 2 recreational course first, because it means that you can then just focus on the new skills and the snow science that you're learning instead of having also to deal with like learning and wrapping your head around different ways to interface with the terrain at the same time. Now, for the avalanche level 1 and avalanche level 2, the absolute best way to do it, in my opinion, is to take the level 1 in the terrain in the region that you are most likely to travel in. Then for the avalanche level 2, take that in a new to you zone, a different type of snow, a different snowpack, because that will allow you to just expand so much more. I try to take courses outside of my normal area as frequently as possible, just so I know how to deal with those different snowpacks when I go to them, and then also bring back the skills of looking at different problems from those areas. It's not a need, but it is an awesome way to do it. It's a great way to travel too. That's all I got for this episode. If you like what you're hearing, please hit the follow or the subscribe button on your podcast platform and share it with at least one person, because sharing is the way that more people listen. Like a direct message to a friend is way more useful than simply listening and doing nothing with it for getting this to people that actually find it valuable. So please share it. Final piece, and the little bit of CYA, is the views and opinions expressed on this podcast by the guests and by the speakers do not necessarily represent the views, opinions, stances of any entities they may represent. It is solely those of the speakers. Have a good one, and I'll see you next time.